Unlock the future of pathology with Pathology News, your ultimate source for cutting-edge insights, expert analysis, and the latest breakthroughs in digital and computational pathology. Don't just stay informed, stay ahead.
Hello and welcome to Pathology News for another podcast episode. Today we have the delight of having Liron Pantanowitz with us, who's the chair of the Department of Pathology at the University of Pittsburgh and the more mentioned professor of pathology there as well. Now, it's really quite shocking looking into Liron's background because the number of titles he's had over the past is so extensive. It's almost like introducing Daenerys Targaryen in Game of Thrones or a monarch of England or something like that. You know, looking at your background, you're the professor of pathology at Michigan, director of anatomic pathology at Michigan, James French professor of pathology, and then going back before COVID, you're vice chair for pathology informatics, and the list just goes on and on and on. But yeah, I guess first question for you then, Liron, how did you get into digital pathology in the first place, and what was your motive for doing that?
Hi, everyone. And so thank you to you and the organizers for giving me the opportunity to be on this podcast and share my story journey, and then hopefully my vision, and hopefully that will encourage some of you to digitize your world too, not just at home, but at work. So I got involved in pathology informatics first, not necessarily digital pathology as a specific field, way back when I was a pathology resident at Harvard. And that was because there were so many processes and tasks that were assigned actually to residents back in the day that could have been digitized. And so I got involved in pathology informatics to see how computers can improve workflow processes and so forth. And one of the things that made the most sense was digital pathology. One example was I was assigned this task of making sure when people gave talks that the Kodochromes would work and they wouldn't jam. And if they jammed, I had to go to the back of the room and fix those. And that was so archaic. And we used that process forever. And clearly going digital made a whole lot of sense. And from there on, everything that we tackled, which was taking gross photos in the mall or taking pictures of samples when we were grossing them, it was way better to do that digitally. So as technology advanced, I always looked at trying to apply that technology to what we do to make the process better. And then one of the best shiny objects that was delivered my way was whole slide scanners, which allowed us to digitize entire slides. And then from there, endless applications, technology, primary diagnosis, computational pathology, and so forth. So that's how I got involved. More specifically, though, I wanted to make sure that we weren't just talking the talk, but could actually walk the walk. So it was one thing to hype about using digital imaging. It was a very different process to actually implement it and try and use it for clinical purposes. And when I tried to do that myself, when I was working at Bay State Medical Center in Massachusetts, there were no real guidelines out there to do that. There weren't even textbooks to look at into as a reference on what others had done. And so for that reason, I did two things. I got involved in the field. One was to provide some sort of vehicles to disseminate information. And that's how I got involved in starting the Journal of Pathology Informatics, writing one of the first textbooks about pathology informatics, and got a lot of people who are influential and had experience to help me do that. And then the second thing is when I wanted to use whole slide imaging in the labs that I was working in, I wasn't sure how to validate these things and make sure they were safe. I knew that if I was called the Director of Pathology Informatics, I would be responsible if things didn't go well. And so at that point, when I was involved with organizations like the College of American Pathologists, we got together and wrote some guidelines. So there was some personal effort for me to learn about digital pathology. There was this desire to create some academic interest in the field, which I did through the journal and other textbooks. And then to actually provide some official guidelines and like the whole slide imaging recommendations that came out of the CAP and have been revised since then. And the good thing about that is it expedited adoption. People didn't feel that they were rogue and doing this on their own. And if there were guidelines, then people would be willing to use the technology. And it didn't just happen in the US, actually. There were guidelines produced by many countries, UK, Germany, and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose I'm right in saying that those guidelines shift and change year on year with the new technologies that are coming out and the more information that we have and a better understanding of what good validation looks like. What are your thoughts on that?
To be honest, when we first started the guidelines, there was no real published evidence out there to base those guidelines on. And so people like evidence-based guidelines. And so many of the recommendations were based on expert consensus. As a group of experts that use this and work with it, these are the best recommendations we can have. But now a lot of people have used whole site imaging technology and applications thereof and have published the evidence. Like in the UK, Darren Trainer at Leeds, etc. They published a lot of work. And so we've accrued a lot of peer-reviewed literature, and that provides evidence which further strengthens guidelines. So I would say the first round was best practice. Second round is based on evidence of what does and does not work.
Okay, interesting. To move the conversation onto UPMC there, and perhaps we can apply some of the CAP guidelines that you yourself have put together there. Could you tell us a bit about the team that's involved at UPMC and what stage of digital pathology you're at the moment?
So just as a quick reference to the background, the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center has always been an innovative place where people have always been at the cutting edge of trying to adopt technology, especially digital pathology. And we've done that for more than a decade. So when I came back as the chair, it was both easy and hard. Easy because this was a very receptive environment who were digital ready. They just needed a catalyst to help them go fully digital and not be afraid to use AI for that purpose. So when I got back, I assembled a team of experts who all had various expertise in digital pathology per se, and actually implementing imaging technology at their own institution. Like Dr. Matthew Hanna, I asked if he used to be a fellow that I trained many years ago, and he'd gone off and become very successful and a celebrity in his own right in the field. And I asked Matthew to come back because I needed someone who could practically help me digitize a very large system. We have over 40 hospitals. We make 2 million slides a year. We do 30 million lab transactions a year. And to digitize that whole operation and connect 40 hospitals over quite a large geographic span is no simple task. And I needed someone who knew how to do that and wasn't afraid of doing that. And I was happy when Matthew came and joined me. Now, I also needed someone who was an AI expert. And I'd asked Dr. Human Rashidi, who had already built 2 AI centers before at universities, if he would come to Pittsburgh, be my executive vice chair of the computational pathology and informatics division. And then within that, if he would help me start an AI center, because we needed to know a lot more about AI. I wanted 1,000 AI algorithms in our department installed, and I couldn't buy all of those. So I needed him to help me build some of those. Yeah. And I was happy when he came back and helped me start the AI center. And then that AI center now has about 30 people in that center that so it takes a village to get this done. And so I have a good village. And so our goal is we can go fully digital and we can now use more AI, either homegrown or vendor supplied.
Yeah, homegrown AI, it's a great term. I'd love to hear more about this AI center then. So you told us a little bit about the vision there, but to dig really into that, were these algorithms that focused on cancer pathology or a wider range of associations?
So first, our official name for the AI center is called CPACE, Computational Pathology and AI Center of Excellence. And it's now about 1.5 years since we first opened that center. There are 2 things about the center. Is number one, we put everything under the umbrella of computational pathology. Most people just talk about AI and they go straight to whole site imaging and AI, but we build AI for imaging, text, and tabular data. So we haven't left out lab medicine and clinical pathology. So that's getting data out of the lab information system or the EMR, which is either in text or tabular form. But we also do a lot of work with digital pathology, which can be any type of image, including whole site imaging. So we tackle all types of data, and we also tackle all forms of computational pathology. We don't just do traditional AI, which is taking pixels and using those for diagnostic or prognostic purposes. We also work with non-generative AI. We have our own GPTs and GVs, etc., that we've created for reporting purposes and other tasks.
That's really interesting. I suppose you can really, from my point of view anyway, bin AI into 2 different categories, one being the image analysis side and everything else that goes on in the pathology workflow. So helping with reporting and such. Next, I wanted to ask you about and this natural transition really from our AI conversation there onto Pitt AI Path Connect. I believe that's a congress that you hold there at the University of Pittsburgh, something I don't know a lot about, so I'd love to hear more about it.
So we feel in our department, one of our mission is not only just to learn about AI, develop AI, but it's also to share and disseminate that knowledge to others, beginning with high school students, then med students, and then pathology trainees. We feel it's our responsibility to basically teach them about AI. And there are many stakeholders when it comes to disseminating that kind of information. They're not just the trainees, there are other pathologists. We also have partnerships with government and state officials who want to know about AI in healthcare, especially when you're building data centers and it uses up a lot of energy. They want to know about that. The best way for us to share that knowledge, and we felt, was to hold a symposium where we could bring all stakeholders together. We could bring our experts in our own AI center together with other institutional leaders, both on the university and the medical center side, who govern AI and make decisions on which platforms we will use at an enterprise level to be there. So we can show people, if you want this to work in your own institution, you really need to bring all parties together. We brought organizations like the College of American Pathologists and leadership and the president to also participate in this symposium. We brought people from the military, the Joint Pathology Center, the VA participated in our symposium. We had state representatives who were very important because there are AI bills that are being approved at the state level here in Pennsylvania that we wanted to make sure we know about, and we have some sort of say and can maybe influence the vote in favor of using AI for healthcare and getting that reimbursed. So we brought all those people together. We did it in a wonderful venue. We put them on the 60th floor of our UPMC steel tower with an amazing view of the entire Pittsburgh. But we also made it exclusive. We didn't open it up for everyone. We limited it to about sort of 80, 90 people. It was an exclusive event. And a key aspect of this was to bring the vendors who are interested in digital pathology and AI to the event. And we did not have the vendors with their exhibits outside the event. We put them in the room where it happens, actually. And they loved it. We had amazing feedback because the vendors could interact with state officials, with academia. And so it was a perfect mix and it went down very well. And as a result, we are hosting another Path Connect this year. And this year's focus will be more on generative AI.
Okay, interesting. And, that change to generative AI then, what's the reason for that? Is that current changes that, the way we see AI being used clinically today?
We have a lot of experience with traditional AI, which is taking a whole site image, breaking that up into image patches, and then using it to train different AI models. We have a lot of knowledge about that, and those are being used in clinical practice today. There's several AI companies selling commercial algorithms that are successful and even cleared by regulatory bodies like the FDA. But we don't know a lot about generative AI, and that field is expanded so rapidly, and it's lumped under the umbrella of AI, and everyone wants to use it in healthcare. But I don't know if we know enough about it. How do you even validate that? How do you even know if an algorithm is hallucinating? And what percentage of hallucination is acceptable when it comes to patient care? It's timely, it's topical, everyone's talking about it, but we also want to make sure it's not all hype. We have started to clinically test some of these generative AI tools in our own practice. And so we wanted to share that knowledge and have an open conversation and focus on Gen AI for this year.
It sounds like UPMC is really leading the way. I think the fact that you're bringing in stakeholders from all avenues is absolutely amazing. That's something that we really struggle with here in the UK, is getting government policy to change in order to understand and adopt the new ideas that are forming the future of clinical medicine. Next, I wanted to stay on the topic of UPMC and ask you about the scan van. Now, I don't really know much about this either. But
yeah, I'm happy to share that story with you. It's quite an innovative opportunity for labs. First, the story begins with the company Leidos. Leidos is a really successful company, and in the US, they provide a lot of technology products to the US government. And they approached us at the University of Pittsburgh and asked if we would partner with them, and they would help fund AI and digital pathology technology that they could use and that they could pass on to some of their clients, like the US government. One of the things that they were working on is trying to digitize all of government facilities in the US. Let's take VA hospital. There are hundreds of vets, ex-military folks that go to the VA hospitals for care, and they've got 300 million archived cases at these VA hospitals. Now, it's a very expensive endeavor to bring in scanners and bring up a digital pathology lab in all of these sites. That's very expensive, and to get them connected. So how does one archive all of those cases and digitize them? So instead of buying scanners, bringing them into each hospital, creating that infrastructure to do that, they felt that you could drive that up to any hospital. You could bring and drop off a digital pathology lab, and then people could use that, get everything scanned and archived, or keep it there for long term. We agreed to pilot that, yeah. And so they dropped off a scan van with this state-of-the-art digital pathology lab inside. It's climate controlled, so people can work there. You just need to hook it up to get electricity, and then once powered, that they have a variety of scanners to handle all types of slides, whether they are histopathology slides or whether they are cytology slides. And we've been working with them to streamline that workflow, introduce AI into that workflow to triage how slides get scanned. And so it's been a very successful partnership with Leidos. We haven't really publicized that. We're in the process of working on those publications now.
Interesting, and a really interesting concept as well. Now, we spoke about AI a fair bit already, but just to ask you a really simple question, what significance do you think AI will have in the clinical pathology space?
A lot of people are interested in AI because it provides the justification to go digital. So if people are looking for what's the return on investment for me buying whole site scanners or saving all these images, well, AI provides a really good justification to spend on that technology, because reimbursement otherwise, or cost saving measures, or reducing the number of pathologists you may need, that's not a very strong argument. And it has not been, and has actually been one of the barriers for people getting the funds to digitize the entire lab. But AI makes a whole lot of sense. But it makes a whole lot of sense for many other reasons, not just because it justifies going digital, which is a prerequisite, but it does make a whole lot of sense because you do make improvements in accuracy. Pathologists do not have crystal balls where they can make predictions on who will respond to therapy and not. These are things that AI models can be trained to do. And then with generative AI, as we've been talking about, it's very exciting. Now, I will tell you, Sid, that if you haven't started to use AI, you already are behind most other labs. AI has been around for a long time. You can say who coined the term artificial intelligence. That goes way back, probably even before Turing, maybe. But in our own lab, we use 6 AI algorithms in clinical practice every day. And now you can ask me, were there guidelines on how to install those? No, we had to figure it out ourselves. Do we know how to monitor them every day? No, but no one else knows either. So we're figuring that part out ourselves. Are we getting paid for using it? No, because there's no billing codes here in the US. Maybe for AI for PAP tests, yes, there is a code, but you don't get paid that much more for using it. So we haven't really waited for the perfect storm to say, okay, now everything's in alignment. We know how to deploy this. We know how to validate it. We know it's safe. There's billing codes. And we've gone ahead and used it because that computational pathology train has left the station long ago.
It's great to see that labs are still adopting AI without billing codes being there already. And you'll have a really good understanding of this because you have those relationships and that network with regulatory bodies and so on. But do we expect to see billing codes come in for AI in the near future?
Well, we do know, and so I'm talking from a US perspective where I work, and we do know that over years, folks that provide billing codes were receptive to digital pathology billing codes. They provided 13 tracking codes. In other words, what they do is they ask you to provide a billing code for digital pathology on different, if you're using it for primary diagnosis or using it for image analysis, to provide a billing code, but it's for tracking purposes, to see who is using it, what's the volume, where's the value. So if you're going to attach a dollar amount to that, they have some idea. So that gives me hope that the same will happen with AI, that there will be an investment in that. But there is a concern also, at least here in the US, that if you poke the bear, you have to be careful, what will happen. Because if we go, let's say if we go to CMS, who instrumental in creating billing codes, and we tell them, hey, we want a billing code for using AI for prostate biopsies. And they say, okay, tell us a little bit more about that. And we tell them, we're so much more efficient. It's quicker. It's 5 times as fast as the old way of doing things. And we're even more accurate without any cost of making a misdiagnosis. They could turn around and say, well, if you're saying it's so much quicker and easier and better, we should actually pay you less. If you're saying it's 5 times quicker and we should pay you 5 times less maybe. So people are concerned that the billing code assigned may be less than the traditional manual way of having pathologists do it on a mic or a monitor without AI. I don't know how that will pan out, but I still think we should advocate for being reimbursed for the technology if it adds value from a workflow perspective, safety perspective, outcomes, that we should get reimbursed. So we have not yet, but we'll have to see.
That's a really fascinating point of view, actually. And let's sit here and foresee the future. If we do have billing codes for everything we imagine we might, do you think that would be the final barrier to digital pathology adoption across the US? That would mean that everyone was adopting it, or do you think there's more barriers?
Well, there are several barriers to digital pathology, and people have always, this is the main barrier. And then when we overcome it, digital pathology adoption is still slow. People complained in the beginning that, we're never going to get regulatory approval for the technology. And it took a long time. In the US, now we have many FDA cleared products, which actually confuses people more because now we have so many products, we don't know which one to pick. No one went fully digital in every single lab. And so clearly regulatory barriers was not the main barrier. Then people had a cost of the technology. While it is expensive, storage has come down. Platforms can integrate the technology way better. And so we're more efficient and actually can save on cost through efficiencies. And so cost is definitely important, but the cost has come down, and yet no one has gone fully digital and using AI for every single case. To me, I think two of the main barriers we have to overcome, which have not been, is integration. My pathologists here at UPMC hate the fact that we have all these standalone systems. They log in and they do their reporting and ordering, additionals in the lab information system. And then they have to log in for digital pathology. There's a PACS equivalent image management system. And then if they're using the AI algorithm, they have to log into that system. If it was just one system, it would be way easier. We are trying to get to that holy grail. And that's one of the things I've asked Dr. Matthew Hanna to help me do, to get all of these integrated so we have a seamless workflow. But the interoperability isn't just up to us as a client. It's really up to the vendors to work together, or maybe the government to insist on interoperability standards. And I know everyone's trying to push DICOM, but not everyone is adopting DICOM. But the second barrier is a mindset. The mindset of pathologists is still, not all of them believe that going digital makes them, faster. Some people, they're slower on a computer monitor with a mouse than a microscope with a slide. And that's true. While they may be slower, the whole process, beginning to end, is probably quicker. Some of them are technophobic. Some still need more time to trust. We went live in January this year, AI-assisted pap tests. And, there was a learning curve, and I think we've overcome it. I think people need time to learn to use the technology and trust the technology. And I'll tell you, Sid, this is a quote that I'll steal from Bill Gates. Bill Gates said, if you ever want to highlight an inefficiency in your workflow, is try and computerize it. And we've experienced that a lot. So when we try and digitize something and then add AI, we're appalled at how bad our workflow is and all these workarounds we had to train AI to do. And so that's also been a problem. Is there's no cookbook where everyone gives you the perfect recipe, because I guess all labs are different. And so you have to work with your vendor, and you really need a good marriage with your vendor. So I think people have disillusion where they think that we're going to put it digital, we'll use AI. And then when you install it, look, we're done, we were successful. And that's actually only the beginning of your journey. Is there are updates and your workflow has to get better. And, then that's where people get frustrated, because there's no perfect recipe to do it for every single lab.
And I think, as a community, we're learning together and growing together as well. When we all started this digital pathology and AI journey, we had all of these vendors that were very much siloed, and DICOM wasn't a thing, and the vendor systems could only communicate with the same type of vendor system, and they didn't speak to each other at all. But that's a hurdle we're starting to get over now as more of them adopt DICOM and work together. And then on the human contingent side, I think you made some really good points as well. For me, perhaps that's the biggest barrier to adopting digital pathology, is getting your pathologist who's been practicing traditional microscopy for years and years to move away from that and adjust their entire reality to looking at pathology on a screen rather than down a microscope. To stick with the labs then, and digital pathology and AI, of course, how important do you think it is that labs start building up their biobanks, their digital repositories of whole slide images at this point? Every hospital is geographically different from every other hospital, and to an AI, those whole slide images look very different. They have a different pool, a different proteome pool, we can say. How significant do you think it is that labs should start digitizing their slides now so that AI in the future can be used as a diagnostic to a better advantage?
Your question even applies to just starting to digitize your operation. So I think if you start scanning your slides now, there's a lot of advantages. One, you learn to do scanning, which histotechs, IT analysts, everyone needs to learn to go digital. It's not just the pathologist. And so just scanning your slides now, even for archiving purposes, or even if you retrospectively scan, you will become a much more digital savvy institution, lab, organization. So you should start doing that now. Everyone should be able to ride that bicycle and be comfortable with it. While you're doing that, if you're on your digital images, they are then very valuable, because when you start to go digital, one of the best reasons to go digital is easy access to your archive. Instead of waiting for a slide to be pulled that may have been misplaced, or someone has taken it for a research project or a QA project. So I think there's a lot of value in doing that right now. From an AI perspective, I don't think every lab has to have these huge archive databases in order to train AI or validate their own AI. I do think it's important, though, for verification purposes, so that, let's say you have an AI algorithm, either it's your own homegrown one, you commercial algorithm, you will have to verify that that algorithm works well on your images. But I don't, most labs will be able to retrain algorithms to make sure that it's generalizable to their lab. In other words, make sure that our patient population is included. There's no bias in this algorithm, because most labs don't have the skill set or the time or the resources to do that. And I don't think most companies, AI companies out there, will come and say, okay, give 2,000 of your images and we will retrain the algorithm. What they will do, they will tweak the algorithm to make sure your images that have, stain quality and image file types, which is more of a verification process, and they don't need that large of a database. So I think it's necessary to become digital savvy, but I don't think it's necessary to get AI started, because you're not retraining algorithms. You just need to get them tweaked and locked down so that they are safe to use.
Interesting. Yeah. And very well answered. Thank you. To start to wrap this up then, I just wanted to ask if you had any advice for a lab looking at digitizing for the very first time. What approach should they think about taking, and what should be most important to them?
I think you need the right team. Don't be shy to ask around folks that have done it. But, I will caution people that are trying to go digital. When you call another lab that says we're fully digital, the truth is, I don't think they're fully digital. There are many slides that do not get digitized, and people don't want to tell that story. There are many labs that do not. They talk about the successes, but not their failures, what didn't work. And so I think if you're trying to go digital, or you're trying to apply AI for the first time, just be cautious about people selling you a lot of hype and that it's an easy thing to. So you do need to assemble the right team, and you need to remember there are many stakeholders, not just pathologists. There's lab administration, there's IT, there's the operational staff, the technologists, and so forth. And so everyone has to play a part in that. The next thing, there's a challenge to pick the right product, and a lot of people are confused. Now, as I mentioned, it's great that we have so many products. We have hardware, we have software, we have image management systems that can integrate into all of this. So which one do you pick? And then people get confused. Do I need to pick a system that protects the entire pixel pathway? Am I allowed to mix and match? What if it's regulatory approved? Now can I switch things out? And then is it off-label? That makes it more confusing. And so that's very confusing. And, people need to be prepared to make those decisions. I also think that you need to trust your vendor a lot, because this is a long-term marriage. It's not just, quick date, get engaged, and okay, we're done. The long-term marriage, because there's continuous update, there's new applications to be added. Your own lab may change the IT environment, and then you need the support from the vendor, et cetera. And so if you don't have this long-term relationship, the collaboration will be tough. And yeah, I do think it's worth making that commitment. I mentioned the trainers left the station, and many labs have and aren't successful at doing that. And if you practice in a capitalistic society, which is where I practice here there is a competitive advantage to trainees won't want to go to archaic places. Patients want to go where they can get cutting edge technology that will diagnose and cure their cancer and make predictions. And if you want to brand yourself and you want to do all the cool academic research, you're going to need, tools and the technology to do that. So to maintain to be competitive, I think you do need to adopt.
Fantastic. That's a really interesting insight, definitely. Liron, I think that's us really. Thanks for your time today. I've really appreciated having you on, and I'm sure our audience will as well.
All right. Well,
thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.